So welcome tonight to the League of Women Voters presentation about the charter question on Plymouth's May election ballot. So greetings to all of you, and thank you for attending here in person at Town Hall, and also for those of you who are watching on PAC-TV. So tonight's presentation consists of an introduction, which I'm doing, a slide presentation, followed by a question and answer period, and a few concluding remarks. For those of you who don't know me, I am Alice Legue. I am a Plymouth Area League of Women Voters member. However, I live in Bourne, and so I have agreed to moderate tonight's meeting as a non-Plymouth voter. The League of Women Voters is a three-tiered grassroots organization with local, state, and national chapters of both women and men, members aged 16 and older. We are nonpartisan, meaning we do not support candidates for public office, nor do we support political parties. We are very involved, however, in voter service activities, such as educating citizens about our voting rights and responsibilities, about candidates running for political office, and ballot questions, such as the charter question, which is on the ballot for next month. We also may take positions on current issues. The decision to take a position on an issue is followed by a study of the issue, and then actions in support of the issue position, such as speaking at government meetings. For example, earlier this year, a local league member used our local quality education position to speak in support of the Plymouth School Committee budget request at the Select Board joint meeting with the school committee and advisory and finance committees. Our local league also took action using the league's state and national positions on climate change to partner with other local organizations to declare a climate emergency in Plymouth and to promote the hiring of a climate resiliency and sustainability planner. Regarding the charter ballot question, the Plymouth Area League has decided not to take a position, but to remain neutral. Nevertheless, the League has been active educating citizens about the proposed charter so that voters can make an informed decision on May 20th, when either voting yes in favor of the proposed charter or no in favor of the current charter. Since our League has not taken a yes or no position on this charter ballot question, the goal of our presentation this evening is to be objective, factual, educational. We strive to avoid making value judgments about any part or the whole of the proposed charter. Our sole goal is to inspire all citizens to come to their own judgments and decisions and then vote knowledgeably on May 20th. To that end, we encourage citizens to become familiar with the proposed charter, discuss it with others, and form your own opinions and final decision as to voting either yes or no. So that now leads us to the slideshow part of today's program. Two of our league members, Lyle Lawrence and Martha Vautrain, will share presentation remarks with the slideshow above. They were league observers at nearly all of the many meetings of the Charter Commission, and they are now part of the Charter Education Committee. Lyle and Martha.
Well, good evening and welcome to a conversation about the proposed changes to Plymouth's charter. One problem to talking with a group like this and the on-scene television audience is that I'm not sure exactly how much knowledge each of you have about our current form of government. Some of you probably have extensive experience, may hold town offices. Others of you may be new to town and not even know much about it. So I'm going to take a brief moment to walk through what we currently have. Just a quick show of hands, how many in the audience, and I know it's going to be a lot of you, are familiar with the current charter form? Okay. Thank you, and I don't know how you at home looked, but I imagine there are a lot of you. So, next slide, thank you. Our current structure, form of government, the town meeting form of government, according to the Antiquarian Society, dates back to 1622, when they held their first town meeting, so 2 years after the landing in Plymouth here. And the current structure is a representative town meeting, because we certainly couldn't get all the citizens of Plymouth into an open town meeting. So our representative town meeting is the legislative branch, and you can see that on the left of the slide. The legislative branch is comprised of 18 precincts that elect 9 town meeting members each. If you do the math, that comes out to 162 town meeting members. The town moderator manages town meeting via town meeting time, and that is a handbook of parliamentary law, somewhat similar to Robert's Rules of Order, and the moderator, he or she appoints currently 15 members of the Advisory and Finance Committee. Each of the precincts elects a precinct chair. So there are 18 members of the Committee of Precinct Chairs. And I'm going to quote from the current charter for the responsibilities of the Committee of Precinct Chairs. The Committee of Precinct Chairs is able to form committees to study issues and review review town bylaws, town meeting rules, the status of past town meeting actions, and this is where the quote comes in, and for other such purposes as they shall deem appropriate, and shall make recommendations to the representative town meeting and or the moderator at least annually. So that's the legislative side of our government. The other side is the executive branch, and currently the executive branch comprises the planning board, the 5-member select board, and the town manager. The planning board and the planning department have the responsibility to work to define the vision and goals of the town by way of the town's comprehensive master plan and the town's zoning bylaws. The select board is responsible to lead based on the vision and goals of the town. They approve warrants, hirings, and firings, and work with the town manager, who is a hired person, not elected, and the town manager acts as the CEO to ensure smooth decision-making and best practices for setting directions for the town. Next. So how did we get to our current form of government? Well, our current charter dates from 1999. Small revisions have been made throughout by charter review committees, and those changes are approved by town meeting, not by registered voters. So the town meeting members approve changes that are made by charter review committees. And later on, we'll talk a little bit about what charter review committees can and cannot do. Over the years, there has been some undercurrent of dissatisfaction with our current form of government. Criticism it was too cumbersome, inefficient, missed business opportunities, or was inappropriate for a town our size, and so on. I'm sure you've heard them. Some residents felt we should remain a town with 162 member representative town meeting, select board, and town manager form of government. But others who felt that representative town meeting was not nimble enough wanted to move away from town meeting to a town council form of government with far, far fewer elected council members. And some felt that, well, we're the size of a city, so why don't we become a city and elect a mayor? So next, please. So some citizens who wanted to see a change in our form of government, back in May of 2021, followed procedures in Mass General Law 43B, collected signatures from at least 15% of the registered voters in Plymouth, and allowed them to put the question of a charter commission on the ballot. In May of 2021, voters were asked on an election ballot whether the town wanted to study and potentially change the form of government. On that ballot were two essential choices. Did the voters want a charter commission to examine our current charter and make changes if they felt it was needed? And B, who did they want to choose to be on that charter commission? Those are the two items that were on the ballot. Basic issues that the Charter Commission had to decide first was what general form of government was going to be explored in depth, city form or town form. The commissioners took nearly 9 months to examine other forms of government in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and finally, on May 7, 2002, voted 6-3 to retain representative town meeting. The three commissioners voting no expressed a preference for a town council. However, once that decision was made, the remaining conversations fleshed out the details how changes would be made to our current form of the representative town meeting government. So, next. So, the voter's choice this coming May is specific and binary. It's whether we want to stick with the current charter or enact the proposed charter. It's a yes or no question. The charter has many changes, so voters should study it closely. Figure which of the issues being addressed in the proposal are most meaningful or not, on the whole, whether you should vote for or against the proposal. And I do want to just reiterate that the League has not taken a position on the proposed charter. We are neutral. Next, please. So why do charters matter? Well, charters are very important because they delineate powers and the checks on those powers. Down the left-hand side, excuse me, are a number of the powers that the charter deals with. And on the right side are checks on those powers. And they're also included in our current charter and in our proposed charter. But this is why charters matter. Are you happy with the way these powers are distributed? And are you happy with the way that there are checks on them? So I'm going to let Martha now walk us through the major changes in the charter. Okay, thank you.
I am Martha Vautrain, Precinct 4, a longtime member of our local Plymouth area League of Women Voters. And tonight I will be talking about the differences between our current charter and the proposed new charter as presented by the charter commissioners. And I will be referring to this red line version of the proposed charter that was mailed to all Plymouth households in the beginning of March. And anything in red in this document, or this version of the proposed charter, is a change. And as you can see, some pages don't have very much red, but others have a lot of red, and those are all changes. And what you need to know is that even if a change is small, or as small as words that are in lowercase in one of the charters and in uppercase in the other charter, if it's a change from the current charter to the proposed charter, it will be in red. To help us understand about the more major changes in the proposed charter, I will be using the document that the League has created to help us all understand the differences between the two charters. And if there's anybody in the audience here that would like to have a copy of the League's major changes document, please get one on the table there. We also have copies of the red line version of the proposed charter, and they're free for taking. The major changes document that was prepared by the League of Women Voters has 3 columns. The center column is the list of what we saw in the proposed charter as the major changes, and some not as major, but we've made a list of changes. Oh, Charlie, excuse me. Yeah, you do. Sorry. Oh, actually, yeah, you're right. It's not ready. That's okay. You can leave it there. That's fine. Thanks. The center column is the list of changes. The column on the left is the numbers that refer to the changes in the proposed document. And the first number is the chapter number. The second one is the section number, and then the subsection number. So you can reference the proposed charter from the major change League document. And the column on the right is a let's see, notes the League's view of the commissioner's rationale for or impact of the change. So now we will start with the slide right there. The first chapter in the proposed charter is the preamble, which states the goals and values of our town and has been expanded in the proposed charter to include promoting direct and inclusive democracy, recognizing our natural environment, creating infrastructure to support quality of life, and speaking to the importance of long-range planning to accomplish the above goals. Chapter 2, the legislative branch has undergone a number of changes. The Precinct Advisory Committee, 2-1-1, is new in the proposed charter, but actually not in practice. Such a committee helped the town clerk's office, after the 2020 census results were known, to make the changes from 15 to our now 18 precincts in Plymouth. 2-4-1 proposes a third town meeting in answer to complaints that the town was missing opportunities with only 2 meetings, town meetings, 6 months apart. If a third town meeting is not needed, it can be canceled by a joint majority of Select Board and Committee of Precinct Chairs. Chapter 2-7-1 recognizes the legislative branch of town meeting members as a co-equal branch, specifically stating that with the executive branch of Select Board members, town manager, and planning board members. Another change in chapter, please advance the slide. Another change in chapter 2 8-1 is that the moderator would not be elected by the registered voters, but would be elected by the town meeting members, as was formerly done in Plymouth and is currently done in other Massachusetts towns. The moderator would not have to be a town meeting member, as is the case now, and the process for interested registered voters to become moderator is detailed in the proposed charter. There would be a change in how the Finance Committee is appointed. The town moderator would no longer appoint all 15 Finance Committee members, but would retain the appointment of 5 of them, and the Committee for Precinct Chairs would appoint the other 10. There would be a new Legislative Oversight Committee in response to several years of complaints that there was no consistent follow-up of town meeting approved articles. Chapter 3, changes proposed for the executive branch of our government include a change in the number of select board members from 5 to 7. 4 would be elected town-wide, as all 5 are now, and 3 would be elected from 3 districts, the formation of which is detailed in the proposed charter and state law. In Chapter 3, Section 2, Subsection 1, the Select Board powers would be more specifically defined, emphasizing the Select Board role as chief goal-setting, policy-making, and long-range planning agency in town, and explicitly excluding those powers granted to the town manager, which are generally those responsibilities related to the day-to-day operation of our town. Another change for the executive branch involves the master plan, 3-12-4, where the responsibility for compliance lies with the Director of Planning, who must review any proposed change to a bylaw, ordinance, or regulation pertaining to planning and development, and comment on its compliance with the master plan. In 3-17-1, an appointment advisory committee is proposed to work with town manager on the recruitment, evaluation, and recommendation of candidates for appointment to the many active committees that Plymouth town government is fortunate to have. Moving on to Chapter 7, communications and public engagement is all new, so that chapter is all in red in the proposed charter. It sets out the principles for a town government communications plan and charges the town manager with its development and implementation, including responsibilities such as engagement in a multi-channel endeavor with face-to-face meetings, virtual interactions, and online communications, as well as reaching a wide range of residents and organizations to encourage informed participation of and provide a high level of service to Plymouth residents. I know this introduction to the proposed charter and the League change document has been brief, but hopefully it will guide you for over the next few weeks. It will help guide you over the next few weeks as you decide how to vote on the charter ballot question. Now I will return the podium to Lyle, who will lead us through the remaining slides.
Next, thank you. So what we're looking at, the vote on the proposed charter, it's a yes or no. But each element in each article is a variable representing significant change. So how do you decide? So the next slide, please. Some things that you might want to think about the new charter, the proposed charter. You need to think about categories of impact: political power, decision-making, disposition of rights, policies, resources. Capacity. Does this town have the capacity to successfully apply the assets and talents that we have in town? Do we have the people that can make the new charter, the proposed charter, come to life? The cost benefit. What will a given article cost the town? Does the benefit reciprocate the cost? And priorities, revenue sources, water capacity, housing costs. What are your priorities? What is your important issue? And how does the proposed charter impact that? Let me talk about a couple of other things you might want to think about regarding the proposed charter. How will it affect leadership in the town, voter turnout, new revenue sources, taxes, structural deficits, potential overrides? What effect will it have? And again, will it or will it not have any effect on health infrastructure, capacity of our local resources, tourism, deferred maintenance, conservation, climate change, the waterfront, the harbor, the seacoast, water, Agawam, ponds, town systems and wells. Housing, will it have effect on our housing policy, our housing needs and objectives? How about Holtec and nuclear decommissioning process? Communications programming and bandwidth messaging to the town. There is the new section there. Is that necessary? So, and also, even though the charter does not go into schools, will it have any, do you see it having any effect on schools' policies and models into the next decade? So those are things you might want to be thinking. So next, please. So, you can think about your values and how these are values that may be important to you, and how does the proposed charter measure up versus our current charter on some of these values. Would you add anything to this list? Does this charter speak to your values? And what would you add? So, Charlie, thank you. So let's talk about a couple of post-election scenarios. If the charter question succeeds, we transition to a new form of government via Chapter 9 of the proposal. That delineates the changeover in government. However, if the charter question fails, there are two scenarios. And scenario A is a charter that has failed approval at the city or town election, but which has garnered the affirmative votes of at least 35% of the population, is considered, and this is state law wording, so it's called an optional charter. And it's if 10% of the registered voters petition for the optional charter to be resubmitted to the voters within 2 years of the original submission of the charter, then the charter may be voted on again. So that's scenario A, if there is at least 35% affirmative voting. However, if the charter fails to garner 35% of the vote, then there can be a charter review committee. And the charter review committee can make changes to the charter that it determines to be necessary and desirable. The Charter Review Committee is appointed by a special committee consisting of the moderator, who's the chairman, a member of the select board, and a member of the committee of precinct chairs. So they would appoint this Charter Review Committee. The Review Committee, however, by state law, does not have the power, and I'm going to read this because it is law, to propose any change relating in any way to the composition, mode of election or appointment, or terms of office of the legislative body, or the Board of Selectmen or town manager. So it can make changes, but it couldn't make changes like, oh, well, we could have 7 select persons and district select people. That's not in the power of a charter review committee to do. They cannot change around the terms of office. They cannot change around the election of town meeting members. Those are not the purview of a charter review committee. So that's what we could look at as a post-election scenario. So I think we are now on to questions. I would like to publicly thank Joe Hutchinson for putting these slides together. I don't think he's been recognized, and he's done a lot of work, and we keep arguing about, yes, that slide, no, that slide, and we've made him change it 1,000 times. But that was thanks to Joe. So questions?
All right, we are, I'm sure many of you here have questions and opinions. However, this is an informational meeting only, and so we will only be allowing questions that you have as to the presentation, as to the charter. And our questions will be, I'll be on the mic over here, and so those of you with questions about the content of the new charter can use this mic. And then Martha and Lyell will be over there to answer your questions. And so, and they are, as our league has delegated them as the only ones to answer the questions, even though there are probably some individuals here in the audience who may know more than they do. But in order to keep this as strictly an informational and a very unbiased presentation, which is the goal of the league, because we don't take a position, I will, if I need to, I will have to, I will remind you of our request that you strictly have questions to the 2 women. There are 2 other presentations that will be made that are upcoming in the next couple of weeks, where perhaps those of you who do have strong opinions will be able to express them. Oh, there they are. Those are the additional May 8th, the Plymouth First Pros and Cons question and answer session at Town Hall, and and May 20th is the election, and well, that's just a date to remember. That's not about the charter. It's the candidates' night for local races, but certainly would love to see any and all of you back for that. And again, I'm going to ask anybody who has any questions to line up over here so that your faces and can be seen by the TV cameras and by everybody else here in the building. So with that said, I'm going to ask people to come up who have any questions. And if you would just announce who you are also, just for my benefit also, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Alan Costello. I'm a town meeting member representing Precinct 10. And this pertains to the slideshow. I've actually seen it a couple of times, but this is the first time I've picked up on it. And if you have the ability to go back, I think 3 slides, there's a piece of information up there that's inaccurate, and I'm sure it was not intentional, but it's very misleading. It's the first slide that was talking about election results or ramifications.
Oh, the post-scenario?
Post-election scenario?
Post-election scenarios, towards the end of your presentation, yes.
Yes. And could you
If
help
you
us?
pulls it up, I'll read it.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a valid reasoning for the wording, but it's very misleading.
keep going.
You're getting there.
No, but keep going. It's the next one, I believe. There.
Right there, sir.
That's one,
That
yeah?
The very first bullet, transition to a new form of government. Now, I thought we were going to maintain the representative town meeting form of government.
I think that's a very valid correction.
So I was wondering if that could be cleared up. I don't know if there's time to do it in your literature, but that's
Yeah, thank you.
not correct at this time.
It is the same format as representative town meeting. Thank you very much for that.
Okay, and I don't know if there's anyone waiting to have a question, but if not, I'll have a second one.
Go ahead, fire away, thank you.
And this actually goes to the panel, maybe through your forums. But there's been a lot of talk about cost, and I'm not so much worried about the monetary cost, but there's been a lot of talk, at least I haven't heard it, on the cost of time from existing town meeting members, planning board members, selectmen. This new charter brings in quite a bit of increased workload for all volunteer groups across the board. And I'm wondering what the unintended consequence of that may be when volunteers find that they don't have the time or capacity to serve the town in a way that they have for 9 or 10 years. It's going to be very labor intensive. Has that been addressed?
Just ask the question,
Yeah.
please, sir.
Yeah,
Without the editorializing of
Yeah.
it, they can respond
Yeah.
to that.
yeah. Has there been any talk of that, any explanation as to how that will work?
I think we're venturing a little bit into the opinion category and I think what you say is very important, and that's where it comes into play with the values, the capacity in the town to vote your values. Do we have the capacity in the town to the volunteers? I think you talked about the time that was put in. It's a good question. So,
All right, thank you.
Hi, good evening, folks. My name is Dave Golden. I live in Precinct 7. Is it true that the proposed charter takes the selection of the moderator out of the hands of the voters?
do you want to answer that?
Yes. Yes, I mean, it's in the charter, and I mentioned it as you heard, and that is what I said, yes.
Yes, thank you.
Right.
Is it true that the proposed charter puts the selection of the moderator in the hands of town meeting members?
Yes.
Yes.
Are there any other questions? I do have one. Oh, certainly.
Carol Rupinian. I'm just, on the post-election scenarios, if it fails, scenario A, I understand, but the second scenario, could you do the next slide there? That's only if the moderator chooses to form a charter review committee, correct? Is it possible that it will never be addressed, or changes will necessarily come about if we don't get 10% of the voters voting yes?
Well, I do know that the moderator, Stephen Trifletti, has already stated that he would set up a review committee.
And those three people determine what parts of
Oh.
this charter they like and don't like, and
Are there only 3 in the committee?
No, they appoint the committee.
I thought it was only the chairman, one member of the select board, and a member of the committee of precinct chairs?
They appoint the committee.
Oh,
They're
okay,
not
so
the-
it's
they're
more
not
than
the
those
committee.
3
The
people?
committee is larger than that.
Okay, but
Yeah,
they're not obligated to do it if they choose not to make any changes, if they don't get the 10%.
Right.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Yeah, I think so.
Did that spur any more questions, Richard?
Richard Cirque, Precinct 2. Isn't there an obligation under the proposed charter that a charter review committee be formed for that purpose every 5 years, at least every 5 years?
Oh, there are, yes.
Yes, in the proposed charter. I think the question was if the charter failed.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. But in the proposed charter, yes, charter review committee.
It's probably also in the current charter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
and it says at least once every 5 years.
My name's Peter Neville. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 10. And I'm wondering, as you observed this process over the last 18 months, whether or not you had a view or have an opinion as to whether or not the exercise was really in a vacuum. And by that I mean, or I guess the question I have is, how does the charter, as it currently exists, play in the day-to-day operations of the town? Did you have occasion, I guess, to see, for instance, the director of planning come in and talk about the functions that he's responsible for under the existing charter and how that might change?
Yes, they did.
Or perhaps the town manager, who's part of the executive branch, might have hazarded a view as to the weaknesses or the strengths of the current charter and how that might be amplified or diminished in the proposed charter.
Okay. I think, do you want me to?
Well, it seems like there's two parts of your
Yeah.
question, maybe. Is, yes, the many town officials came before the commission as they were meeting and were responding to what they would like to see new or different, and anything that might be new ideas that would help them with their duties and providing services to the townspeople. But I don't remember anything related to when the charter was completed. There was no response from, the town officials were not asked to come before the commission to give their opinion.
Okay. I remember I attended one meeting where the new town manager came.
I just want to, is there an additional question, since this is a
Yeah.
question and answer?
Oh, no,
Yeah.
that's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much, though, sir. Yes.
Hi, Art Disloges, Precinct 15. Thank you so much for doing this. It's great. I've heard it 3 times. I love it every time.
I forgot that.
Do you want to do it?
I think this is a question. I don't know, what was the process and what was the research that the group did to get to the charter itself? I mean, I know they spent months and months and months. Is it fair just to explain or say what they did?
Sure. I think the commission met, they started back in June of 2021 and met initially bi-weekly and then ended up at the end almost every week. They studied many charters in other towns and cities, both. They looked at mayoral and town council forms of government and open town meeting, well, not open town meeting, but representative town meeting forms. They did have many of the town officials in to discuss, and the town officials were pretty open about changes they would like to see. I think the commission listened to a number of people. There were also public comment when a number of residents came and spoke. I thought the whole process was generally very respectful. the commissioners worked very well together, even though they didn't agree in the end as to, they voted 6-3 for representative town meeting. But the dissenters went forward, and then unanimously, the commission unanimously approved bringing the proposed charter to the town. I think that the league we did send a letter to the Old Colony at one point that we were very impressed with the way that the Charter Commission did the job, in the sense that they were respectful of one another, that they had open discussion, and it was the process was what we were happy and praised. Okay, so that's.
And one more comment. The commissioners had a group called the Collins Center that helped throughout the writing of the proposed new charter. And the Collins Center is a group that Massachusetts is lucky to have, in that they advise municipalities across the state who are looking at their charters and wanting to improve them or change them, and change their form of government, maybe. And I think they've been advising over 300 municipalities. So they were able to give a lot of advice to the commissioners. And there were lawyers involved at the state level, and the commissioner's law firm also.
Thank you, Jenny.
Ginny Davis, Precinct 4 Rep. This is not really a question. Well, it is. I would like the two of you to just explain Observer Corps and what that did. I mean, you were at every single meeting, and would you just kind of describe that? Thanks.
The League of Women Voters has had observer corps for years, and we've been involved in that here in Plymouth, and so we decided to observe the new Charter Commission, knowing that there probably would be a vote, and so we go to every meeting if possible, and in this day and age, you can watch them afterward if you've missed one on PAC-TV, thanks to PAC-TV. And we wrote up a short report for our membership that was emailed to all our members on a regular basis.
Are there any additional questions? Okay.
Well, thank you all for attending.
Well,
Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to hand to the audience.
So I would just like to thank all of you for attending this evening and wish you well as you explore this charter and decide whether you are going to vote yes or no. And most importantly, remember to vote. The voting needs to take place on Saturday, May 20th. You can do it from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. or in-person early voting. And all the voting details for the May election are on the inside page of that red-lined proposed charter, and it's also online at the town clerk website. Voter registration for this election is open through Wednesday, May 10th. If I can put in a plug for all of you to come back for Candidates Night, which is a week from tonight, so that you can also have an opportunity to see all of the candidates who are running for select person and who are running for school committee, as those are the two contested elections. So again, thank you so much for coming, and good evening.